Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been meeting with President Emmanuel Macron here in Paris this Wednesday. His visit comes a day ahead of a peace and security meeting for Ukraine on Thursday, which will gather leaders from the so-called Coalition of the Willing, a group of countries considering deploying peacekeeping troops to Ukraine in the case of a ceasefire. Earlier this evening, Zelensky also sat down with journalists to answer questions. He thanked the US for the aid they'd given, but added that US officials often echo Russian narratives. He also said Moscow is not ready to end the war. Take a listen.
I can't be ungrateful to the United States for everything they've done for us, and I believe that they are very often, unfortunately, under the influence of Russian narratives. We can't agree to these narratives, but we are fighting for ourselves and we will continue to fight these narratives. We have no other choice. We are fighting for our independence and for our existence.
Well, to break that down for us, let's bring in Orysia Lutsevych, the Deputy Director of the Russia Eurasia Programme at Chatham House. It's a pleasure to have you with us on the programme today. First of all, what are your key takeaways from what we heard there from Zelensky earlier this evening?
Any war is also a war for the narrative, and Zelensky, as a former actor, perfectly understands that. He has been successful in marshalling the global support for Ukraine. Let's remember that 50 nations were providing all kinds of military assistance to Ukraine in the group called Rammstein. And tomorrow there will be 37 of those meeting in the Coalition of the Willing. And he's trying to push back against Trump's interpretation of war, where he believes by actually accusing Ukraine of not wanting peace or calling Zelensky a dictator and not putting any pressure on Russia will not lead to Trump's outcome of a ceasefire. So it's important that Ukraine has a center stage, and actually we all revert back to the understanding of this as unprovoked illegal aggression.
Now, when it comes to this so-called coalition of the willing, is the idea of putting boots on the ground in Ukraine what's still dividing Europe?
I think the big question that is for Europe to answer is what kind of, first of all, ceasefire, if there will be a ceasefire set up. It is very difficult to plan a concrete military operation without understanding the situation on the ground. We are seeing first indications of what it may look like. If it is a ceasefire in the Black Sea, then you need a special force to monitor that ceasefire and ensure security of trade corridors. That may require a coalition of the countries that are the Black Sea countries and they have powerful navies. If it's a ceasefire on the energy infrastructure, it also means that Ukraine needs more air defense, meanwhile, to shore up its nuclear power stations. So Europe has to seriously start planning for all these eventualities because there are many pathways that this war may still take.
Now, Zelensky says it's too early to discuss roles of future European forces in Ukraine. Is this even a remote possibility, in your opinion?
I think, as I've described, there are various options of how Europe, this coalition of the willing, can reinforce Ukraine's defenses. What many military experts agree is that actually air defense, the joint air shield or sky shield that would protect Ukrainian nuclear, for example, civilian infrastructure, and Ukraine has more than 5 nuclear power stations to protect, could create a safety zone for business, for people to return, and for our economy to work. But also, I think it's important that we keep the focus on the Black Sea because it's an important trade route. And we want to ensure that Russia doesn't remilitarize Crimea and threaten further the ports of Odessa, Mykolaiv, and other areas. So there's a variety of options, including at some stage possible deployment on the ground.
Now, President Emmanuel Macron has said today that Russia must accept a 30-day ceasefire offered by Ukraine without preconditions. But what happens if Moscow simply does not accept this proposal?
What happens is that the war will continue the way it's been now lasting for 3.5 years. And I think what is important is that Coalition of the Willing tries to pass the message to White House and to Trump personally that US should also not agree on some of these outrageous conditions that Kremlin is putting on the table, such as, for example, demilitarization of Ukraine, or premature elections right after the ceasefire that will destabilize Ukraine, that will allow Putin to play this internal game of politics in Ukraine. And such rushed election would jeopardize actually democratic unity inside Ukraine.
Orysia Lutsevych from Chatham House, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today on the program.